They got to go today. Okay.
Sir, you cannot.
They can record all they want.
So you need to go to a lawyer.
Fight a suspect after 2 of 3 victims were found shot dead in a Wilson neighborhood Monday afternoon. Wilson officers were called to the 900 block of Washington Street for reported gunfire around 2 p.m.
What happens when the same person whom a community admires turns out to be their worst nightmare? Wilson, North Carolina, is a small community struggling with inconceivable tragedy that has torn down all their notions concerning heroism, violence, and justice. This is the case of Donta Chesnut, a man who dedicated his life to combat gun violence and mentoring youth, who was accused of the crimes he once campaigned against. September 15th, 2024, the day when 2 lives were lost, 2 others were wounded, and the rest of the community was left with a single heart-wrenching question: how could this happen? Before September 15th, 2024, there was no one in Wilson, North Carolina who could be asked to say a word about Donta Maurice Chestnut without uttering words of praise. According to the site, Donta Chestnut has become a real hero, and he is standing tall as a testimony to the strength of the will of one person to make a difference. This wasn't mere hollow rhetoric. This was a man who had based his whole image in the publicity as making the change he desired in his community. The director of the nonprofit organization, R. Wilson Chestnut, who is 39 years old, is accused of 2 counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder. However, he was another person in history before that fateful day. The site explains Chestnut as a leader, entrepreneur, mentor, and advocate of high caliber who demonstrated the transformational power of the commitment of an individual to serving the community. The simple yet strong mission of our Wilson, which is a nonprofit organization he established and led according to the organization website, is the following. With the help of meaningful connections and guidance of mentorship, we empower our youth to reach their full potential. Chestnut had long been walking the walk, not merely having been talking the talk. It is almost too ironical to digest. This was the man who had established his reputation as an anti-gun violence advocate. Think about that for a moment. Where other individuals were writing about violence on social media, Donta Chestnut was literally in the streets, interacting with children who would otherwise find themselves resorting to violence, trying to cycle trauma and crime that had ravaged communities such as Wilson over the years. He was not an arm-long activist. This was hands-on, daily work. The charges are issued only 3 days following the interview of Chestnut by the Bailey Bockover of the WITN to run in the upcoming Hometown Hero segment, a segment that would never run as it was to run. The man had even run for city council in 2023. He lost that race, but the fact that he ran tells you something about his ambitions. He wanted to make change at every level, from mentoring individual kids to shaping city policy. This wasn't someone on the sidelines. This was someone who put himself front and center in the fight for a better Wilson. But there's something we need to understand about heroes. They're human. And sometimes the very people we place on pedestals are carrying burdens we can't see, fighting battles we don't know about, and struggling with demons that contradict everything we think we know about them. September 15th, 2024 began as any other Monday at Wilson, North Carolina. The event took place on the 900 block of Washington Street, where fire erupted just before 2 p.m. When the smoke cleared, 1 mother and son died, 2 more suffered injuries, and a community hero had turned into a suspected murderer. He is charged with the murders of 44-year-old Natasha Latrice Sutton and 21-year-old Avante Pender, and injuring Tiffany Fogg and Tyron Sutton in a shooting that took place in Wilson. This was not an act of violence or crime of passion that occurred in the heat of the moment. This was much more tabulated and disturbing. Deborah Anthony claimed that Chestnut rented a house to Natasha and the 3 others. Well, she said he came Monday afternoon and wanted money or to move out. This was then a tenant-landlord dispute that went to the extreme. But what is the way someone who is demanding rent becomes a double murderer? The family members that talked to ABC 11 explained that the situation unfolded in a terrifying order of events. They informed the media that Chestnut went to the house on Washington Street to pay rent and threatened to evict them in case they failed to pay the rent. It is in this that the story is nearly too brutal to digest. Cell phone video that was allegedly recorded by family members showed the moment everything went wrong. Chestnut might have been caught on camera in a since-deleted Facebook videotape addressing Sutton and Pender at the doorway of the house, instructing them to go. Chestnut was shooting a weapon. That was not the end of the violence. Chestnut is accused by family members who claimed that after shooting, Chestnut pistol-whipped another relative at the home and shot the sister of Natasha Sutton, the alleged victim, Tiffany Fogg, who family members said was special needs. According to police, Chestnut wounded two others, the husband of Natasha Sutton, Tyrone Sutton, and her special needs sister, Tiffany Fogg. The fact that one of the victims was reported as special needs contributes another deviation of horrors to an already inconceivable crime. A member of the family who talked to reporters, although not specifying who he was, gave a chilling promise. "We have everything. He will never see the day of the sun again." That is what you want to say when you are sure that justice is not just needed, but is inevitable.
Officers were called to the 900 block of Washington Street for reported gunfire around 2 p.m.
However, what happened after the shooting, perhaps, is the most disturbing part of this case. It is here that the sister of Donta Chesnut, Tiffany Chestnut, who is 36, comes into the picture. Tiffany Chestnut, 36, who is also the sister to Donta, is charged with 2 felony counts of allegedly returning the same gun that was used to shoot back to the suspect as he dropped to the ground as he fled the scene. Think about what that means. Donta Chestnut is accused of being the perpetrator of this heinous crime of violence, according to the accusations. He did not hold the weapon when he fled, and his own sister supposedly took it up and gave it him back. A sister of a suspect in a 2-murder case, Donta Chesnut, is accused of being an accessory after the fact in the fatal shooting taking place in Wilson on Monday. The news of the arrest of Donta Chestnut had a shockwave throughout Wilson that is still shaking even today. Wilson is a small community that is rocked by the death of a man credited with being an anti-gun violence proponent who was accused of shooting a mother and son. This was not any other member of the community. This was their hero, their champion, their alleged protector. Pastor Bishop Sherman Blandon of Mount Moriah Community Church, Wilson, best described the sense of devastation that the community suffered when he interviewed with the reporters and said, "We are only grieving, and there are very many people that do not know why." Puzzled with what happened, the unlucky fact is we may never learn. Nevertheless, no one wins in times such as these, and it leaves a great gap in society. However, the authority punch was made by the people who had known both the victims and the accused. Shatira Barnes, Natasha Sutton's cousin who also knew Chestnut, expressed the complex emotions many in the community were feeling. Even if Natasha owed money or whatever the case was, that wasn't it. Neither was violence and her death. It does not really matter whether this was my family member or not. It's still wrong. But it pains me more to know that it was my family. Barnes didn't stop there. She made a statement that cuts to the heart of how communities process betrayal by those they trusted. Even as a business owner, you can't take matters in your own hands. I know. The thing is that it does not matter what good he did. It does not matter. And I guess folks are not giving that a stand. Wilson has also stopped its after-school program following the murder charges against its director, Donta Chesnut. The organization currently focuses on counseling and mental support of children to whom it provides services. Suppose you are a child and you looked up to this man and he trusted you, perhaps even treated you like a father, and you heard that your hero was suspected of the very brutality which he instructed you to shun. Bishop Blandon touched upon this pathetic fact. To the children that he worked with, "I know that there is a great hole in their hearts, and there are many of them struggling to make it out." What do you say to a child who was taught by someone who said that guns were bad, that violence was bad, that he or she would keep them safe, only to be charged with killing innocent people with a gun? The Chestnut-formed organization is now attempting to salvage the situation. Wilson put on hold its after-school program when the director Donta Chestnut was accused of murder. This is because the organization is now focusing on counseling and mental health counseling of the children who it serves. The practical effect of this tragedy is immediately visible in this decision. 2 people are dead and 2 wounded, but dozens of children who have been receiving that support structure in the programs offered by our Wilson are left without it at the most vulnerable stage in their lives. With this case passing through the legal system, We have rather more questions than answers. Chestnut was arrested and accused of 2 felony counts of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder.
And Pender died at the scene while Fogg was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Police say 39.
The accusations are harsh, the evidence appears to be heavy, and the family members are sure that the justice can be done. But the larger questions extend beyond the action in that courtroom or what is going to happen in the trial. The haunting question that Wilson, North Carolina, and all of us should pose is how a person can devote their life to combating violence and then become the possible effector of the most heinous type of violence. And is there anything we left out? Did the society have warning indicators that it failed to notice or did not want to? Or is this a lesson that we really do not know what is happening in the mind of a person, however much we may think we know him? It is even more unsettling by the fact that this was supposedly in a landlord-tenant dispute. This was not a crime of passion, a lapse of temporary insanity, and not a case of somebody facing a threat to his life. This, according to the stories we have, was a matter of money, of rent debt and an eviction, which was excruciating, irreparably foul. And then there is the question of the involvement of Tiffany Chestnut. How could the sister of a person supposedly assist her after seeing such a horrible crime? What type of family loyalty causes one to apparently turn back to a person who just killed innocent people after allegedly giving him or her a murder weapon? And these are questions that are important in the sense that they make us confront some ugly truths regarding human nature, regarding people who we trust, and regarding the fine boundaries between heroism and horror that seemingly prevails in each of us. The legal process will determine Donta Chesnut's guilt or innocence, but the community process, the healing, the rebuilding of trust, the care for those children who looked up to him, that's going to take much longer. The Donta Chestnut story is a lesson that heroes are not always immune to being villains, and that even those with whom we have the most trust can commit the unthinkable. It is the mourning of 2 families, the traumatization of the community, and dozens of children left wondering whether they can ever trust anyone again. Until justice runs its course and tells us otherwise, we have the depressing thought that sometimes the monsters are not the ones lurking in the shadows. They are the ones who we had invited into our homes, our schools, and our hearts. The question now remains to be whether Wilson will be able to get over this betrayal and re-establish the trust that was broken on the 15th of September. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and comment.